Yeah, guys, this is Kyle here. Thought I wanted to explain how I got into professional wrestling. Some of you guys may know how I got into it, or briefly know how I got into it, due to past Q&A videos I had done. But I never really explained thoroughly how I got into pro wrestling. So before I get into that, I thought it was kind of cool that this would be appropriate for this video. I was going through some of my old stuff I was throwing out, and I actually found my 1998 WWF Attitude Era belt, toy belt. I thought this was kind of cool that I still had this. I thought I threw this away years ago. Had a little styrofoam, soft strap, and in the back you can tell it says 1998, made by Jakks Pacific. So I thought that was pretty cool. Finding this again, memories. So how I got into wrestling. Who I got into wrestling? My mom. My mom always has been and still is an advocate wrestling fan. Just a nut. Her great grandmother got her into wrestling, which is cool. So my mom was there with when Ric Flair was in his heyday, and when NWA was when NWA was what WWE is to the wrestling profession. That's how far back my mom goes into wrestling and her grandmother. So the first early things I saw in wrestling was my mom would show me old video footage, and one of the early matches I remember saying was, and I got into wrestling, by the way, at the age of 4. I was 4 years old when I got into wrestling. So the early matches I remember that she's showing me was Ric Flair versus Sting for the world title. Excuse me, I believe, which was at Bash at the Beach, or the Great American Bash. And then after that, another one she had showed me was Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes for the NWA title. This was just I couldn't explain what it was exactly, but it's before I knew about wrestling, it's like whatever it was that I just saw, it's whatever this thing is, I don't know what it is, but I like it. I don't understand much of it, but I like it. And just the whole athleticism and of these different athletes, because I was never really into the football and the baseball and stuff. So wrestling was the one sport I could get into, because I really was into that, other kind of sports, and still am not really to this day. So wrestling was really the one sport that I could really get into. And then Ric Flair during that time, he had the big gold belt, and that's my fascination with wrestling belts. I'm like, oh man, that belt looks awesome. I want one of those. I want that. Having that, and then my brother also got me into wrestling. At a young and at an early age, my brother always told me, he's wrestling's predetermined. Everything in wrestling is predetermined. It's script and whatnot. Now, a lot of people from the outside looking in would say, how dare you, crush your child's dream or something. Most kids that figure out that wrestling's predetermined, they figure that out on their own as they get older. But that really wasn't the case, nor was it his intention to ruin wrestling for me. By him doing that, he actually gave me a lot of psychology and knowledge on wrestling at a young age. So by the time I'm 5 years old, I pretty much know the ins and outs and the philosophy of the basic psychology and philosophy of professional wrestling. The moves, how a story's supposed to be built, and characters and whatnot. So, him giving me this information at a young age, I was like a freaking, a little wrestling genius at the time. So, and he was still a wrestling fan. He still watched wrestling himself, and all the stuff. And he's my bro's 11 years older than I am. So, that was cool. I was always, because he gave me a different perspective of wrestling, not just watching it for as it is, but just watching it for what it is, but then and enjoying it, but also psychology things, how things make sense and whatnot. So, and seeing it from that perspective at a young age, the age of 4 or 5 years old, that really helped me enjoy the product much better. But anyway, so after watching countless videotapes of wrestling or being introduced into wrestling with various videos from the 80s and the whole Hulkamania thing, as for wrestling itself in the wrestling world and what was happening at that moment, at that time. WCW, that's when I got into WCW. This was in 1995. I think it was about a year after WCW, I think, went head-to-head with WWE, starting the Monday Night War. At that time, Hulk Hogan was at his end with the whole Hulkamania thing, and kind of ushering into the NWO. The outsider angle was starting at that time. You know, a lot of people, you know, it's one thing to say, like, hey, I was there when, you know, this whole stuff played out and whatnot, but it's another thing to say when you can say, truly say you're one of those wrestling fans to say, like, hey, before all of this stuff played out and this angle, you know, got going, I was one of the fans that was there to witness this whole thing started and what caused that domino effect in later events. Like, that's a truly amazing thing to say. Like, I was one of those fans that was there in the beginning when Hall and Nash jumped ships from one channel to the other, Hulk Hogan turning heel, and they started the whole NWO faction. I was there, and that's a tremendous thing to say. You know, and they were rolling off, you know, and then the year of 95 and whatnot. I did watch WWE, but I liked WCW a little bit more as a kid. WCW to me was, it was just different. It's like, you know, you look at this thing here, it's like, okay, this is wrestling. This is what wrestling's supposed to be. And then you look on the other side of the room, it's like, okay, this thing over here is wrestling, but it's different. I don't know what it is about it, but it's just different than what is normally standard and considered as wrestling. And that's how it was with me with WCW as a kid. So I'm like, I'm going to gravitate towards this. I still watch WWF a lot. You know, I know a lot of people had troubles. A lot of people went back and forth during those times, switching stations. I never had that problem. What my brother and I would always do, we'd always watch WCW as it happened right there. And at the same time, in the other room, we would be recording WWF Raw. So once we're done watching Nitro, and once Nitro goes off, we'll put in our blank tape that we recorded of Raw, and we'd watch Raw. So I got best of both worlds of those two shows. I never had the trouble of flicking from one station to the next. So I thought that was pretty cool. During this time, ECW was starting to make some rumblings. They're starting to come up, you know, in 90, 95. They were really starting to come up and grow. You know, kind of fast forward a little bit past that, you know, WCW, Nitro just like taking off, but kind of fizzling a little bit. WWF was failing, but they're kind of going in a different direction. You know, a lot of people's guy was Shawn Michaels. I like Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels was cool, but for me, Bret Hart was my guy. Shawn Michaels was just a little bit too flashy for me as a kid. Bret Hart was my guy. You know, when everybody else was like abandoning Bret and taking to Shawn, I'm like, I'm still with you, Bret. I'm still a fan. I still love you. That's how I was when I was a kid. You know, that was just me. And I still kind of I even stand true to that statement even now, even in my age now. I still say I'm more of a Bret Hart fan than Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels is an excellent performer, no doubt about it. But I always have been more of a Bret fan than Shawn. But anyway, you know, you go through that. WWE was just like whole Attitude Era. That thing was like freaking hot again, like the whole NWO thing and Hogan turning heel was there right off the bat when the rise of Austin kicked in, whole Austin 316, when the whole rise of the Rock thing, witnessed that firsthand when that started off, and even the Attitude Era, the Montreal Screwjob, just witnessed to all those things firsthand. And, you know, WWF, when they started the whole Attitude Era, man, that was just like whereas with WCW, whereas they were just like different from everybody else, WWF was like different, but different with edge, you know. WCW was just different and just that. And it worked for a period of time, but then WWF was just like, we're different, but we're different with attitude and edge. And it's like, okay, they just took the same philosophy of WCW, but they just kicked it up a notch. And boy, was wrestling so hot then. I mean, I had pretty much every toy you can think of in the 90s, you know, from based off popular TV shows. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles, the Beetleborgs, you name them, I had them all. Transformers, Voltron. But the one wrestling figures I pretty much would buy like every single week is a wrestling toy. I buy a wrestling toy like nonstop. And I remember like one Christmas, I bought like a ton of wrestling figures. I bought the whole DX, D-Generation X action figures. I bought a Rock figure. I had like 2 or 3 different Rock figures. I bought a crap load of WCW toys. Now, in my opinion, I thought WCW had better toys than WWF back in the 90s. But I had tons of WCW stuff. Like, one of the things I had was a WCW toy ring, where it would come with the steel structure that you could build around the ring, and it would have a hook that you can hook to the back of the Sting toy that came with the ring, and you could you can pull Sting down from the hook down to the ring, or you can pull him up with the toy, just like you would see him do on Nitro. I thought that was awesome. And then in the middle of the ring, there was a button that you would press down on it, where it would count 1, 2, 3. It came with a referee figure. That was just good times. Good times. That great Christmas morning. That's like one of my fondest memories of Christmas. Anyway, so you had that. Hold on, I'm just gonna see how much time I have left on here. You know what, I'm gonna wrap it up here. This is gonna be part 1 of my video, so stay tuned for part 2. This is part 1.